Subscribe Kitchen. I'm Josh. It's been a little while since my last video, and I want to thank my Patreon supporters for their patience during this time, but it's time to get back to it, and it's time to make some soup. Today, I'm going to make a clam chowder, one of my favorites. Now, this might be a little different from other clam chowders you've seen, and if you're from a certain region of the country that is known for this dish, maybe you disagree with this, but you're not here making soup right now, are you? I will do this a little out of order for what might make sense. I'm going to first cut all the aromatics for the soup, and then I'm going to essentially take all the trim from that, make a sachet, and season the heck out of the liquid that I'm going to use to cook the clams in, because that in turn will become my stock for the soup. If you want to go ahead and buy already like steamed clam meat and skip this whole part of the recipe, you can, and just replace the 2 quarts of water right there with just 2 quarts of stock. Sure. I just imagine that the workers who have to steam and shuck an industrial amount of clams probably don't love their jobs maybe as much as you would want them to for an ingredient that you're going to use in a soup to impress your family. So I'm going to go ahead and just cook the clams myself, and then use that liquid again for a better flavored soup. Let's begin. So I know for the actual soup in this recipe, I'm going to need a cup of onions, half a cup of celery, half a cup of fennel, but I'm not sure exactly how much onion 1 cup comes out to. So, cut that and peel it. Now, I don't want the peels necessarily, but I will definitely keep the onion ends, because that again will go into the sachet to season our soup. Or essentially it's a court bouillon that we're making to cook the clams in, that will then also become our soup base. Some people might like this onion in the soup to be a little bit on the chunky side. I'll go like a medium dice on it. Well, to me, a medium dice. That is probably somebody else's small dice, but I'm not going to be picky. That's the size I'm looking for. Again, if you want kind of a bigger chunk to it, help yourself, feel free, go a little bit bigger. If you want a little bit finer feel, go a little smaller. That's also totally fine, but I try to get my aromatics all roughly the same size. Especially between the celery and the onion. So, knowing I need 1 cup, here's a half a cup. 1, 2. Hey, look at that. That was almost perfect. So there's my 1 cup of onion that I need, and I'm going to go ahead and just start building my sachet. So how I will do this is, there's a little bowl and a piece of cheesecloth. So once that is done, again I'm going to need a half a cup of fennel, and I know already I don't want to use that part. That's just going to be straight flavoring. That isn't the prettiest outer leaf, so I still have half a cup there easily, so that's going to go into my sachet. Let's cut this in half and see where we are. So again, I will make just 1 cut down. It's not the thickest bulb, but I've certainly seen smaller. And you are going to want to watch out. I don't like to include the root bit there in what I'm actually eating in my soup. But once I get to that point, you can tell by what's cut there, I might already be at half a cup just right there. So, really no need to go further than that, and I do believe the fennel adds a really good flavor to the bouillon that I'm making. So I've got over here a little sizzle platter. I'm just gonna keep adding all of my cut stuff to it. I want a 1/4 cup of shallot. Now, if you don't have shallot, feel free to just use all onion on that. Maybe just go a little bit heavier. If you want to use all shallot, that's even fancier. I'm not going to stop you from that. I love the flavor of shallot. I think it's distinct from the onion, and I think it just kind of adds a nice, balanced, multi-allium family kind of flavor. Yeah, alliums. All right. And I'm going to say that's my 1/2 cup right there. Well, it might be a little bit under. Alright, hold on. We have a solution. Super secret 3rd little shallot. And then those go into sachet. This all goes into my pile of aromatics for later. Take a couple cloves of garlic and just straight crush them for the sachet. Then for the soup itself, since I'm going on aromatics anyway, haha, those 2 little root bits into the sachet. You too, bucko. And you guys come over here. So now, the next one, the celery, I know I don't want that end or that end. That is definitely going to be enough to cover the 1/2 cup that I need. And again, trying to match the size. This is how I like to cut celery. It's also, if you're ever making buffalo wings, this is a good way to, you know, get your celery sticks in shape. Celery. Those are all of the aromatics for the soup. We will get back to that in a little bit and then focus on the rest of this. We are going to add some thyme. Well, I'll find a couple of the good easy ones to pick, and that will go into the soup right at the end as some fresh thyme because it's a really nice addition. Then I have some parsley here that I already picked the good stuff off. Nah, most of it. There's a little. But the parsley stems, again, make a really good flavoring addition to this step. We will go with, they're kind of small, so a bay leaf. There is a tablespoon of coriander and a tablespoon of black peppercorn. So, sachet. This will become important in a moment. So now I will start the liquid that I'm going to cook the clams in. And of course you can ask, but Josh, can't I just cook the clams in the soup? Sure. Yes. Fine. Yes, you can. If you want to make your diners work for their soup, yes, you can absolutely just leave the whole clams in their shells in the soup like you don't care. But that's not my goal here at the moment. So here's that sachet. Boom. 2 quarts of water. And then I'm going to throw a whole lemon in there too. That, if I had left a little bit more space in here, I could have easily put the lemon into the sachet as well. But that, maybe 1.5 quarts of water would have been right. Oh well. And a cup of wine. 1 cup of wine. I like having some acid in there. And then I am just going to let that come to a simmer. I'm going to move on to the potatoes, which need cutting. And I like to use these little baby potatoes because That's as far as I feel I need to go with them. But certainly I also recognize that buying these little potatoes are not the most cost-effective approach to this recipe that already has a kind of expensive main ingredient in the clams. So feel free to use some Yukon Golds. I think the waxy potatoes are a little bit better in this than an Idaho would be. But ultimately, potato is potato. Use what you can, put in what you got. Now, one difference between my lovely chef wife Deneen and myself is she puts corn in her clam chowder. I was raised in Illinois and I ate plenty of corn growing up, and I think there are all sorts of fine and good uses for corn in cooking. I just don't think this is one of them. So go ahead, feel free to disagree with me. It's your soup. Throw in some corn. If I was going to, I would probably use fresh kernel corn that I would then add essentially when I add the clams right at the end, because you don't need to cook like the good stuff very long at all. But if you're going to use frozen corn, I would add it to the soup before the step where I add the cream and the clams, just because the frozen corn is going to drop the temperature of your soup a little bit, and you're going to want it to come back up and actually be at a simmer when you add your clams. One thing I forgot to add to the court bouillon, to the sachet, was this little piece of carrot that Dee had left from a catering thing yesterday. So in the spirit of mirepoix, I'm going to add that into there as well. And because I am capricious and prone to whimsy, I'm also going to throw in a little fresh cayenne pepper. Just one. While we are waiting for that to simmer, there is a tiny little bit more knife work that needs to be done. Here is my parsley, which will just go in right at the end. I had some curly parsley that needed to get used up. Typically I prefer a flat parsley. The flavor's the same, I just think flat looks better, works better, cuts better, I'm not sure. Maybe it's just I got overexposed to the chopped curly parsley at the side of the plate, and you know, like cheap diners in the 90s, and that doesn't appeal to me. But that's really as far pulverized as I need to go on that. And so with basically any recipe, but especially soups and sauces, I find it's a better idea, oh no, to not drop your parsley on the counter. I find it's a better idea to add dry herbs at the beginning. So if I was going to add them like dry thyme to this, I would do that when I'm sweating out my aromatics in the next step, essentially. The step after I cook the clams, 2 from now. But if I'm adding fresh herbs, they go in closer to the end. And that's in part because with the dry herbs, you need to kind of open up those oils a little bit more to redevelop the flavor, whereas the fresh, it's right there, and if you cook the heck out of it, then you're going to actually drain some of the flavor from it. And since there's no real difference between, like, there's no need to layer the parsley and then the fresh thyme in there, I'm just going to simply put them both together. And if you're careful, you really just need to, like, the thyme doesn't need to be chopped at all, you just need to get it off of that woody stem. Nobody likes that woody stem. And of course, if I was 3 minutes more thoughtful, that could have gone into the sachet too, but instead it goes into my, oops, sorry, your trash pile. So, we have our chopped parsley, we have our potatoes, we have our aromatics all ready to go. I've got one more bay leaf that's going to go in that pile, and now it's basically just waiting for my clams. It's been going at a pretty good simmer for, yeah, it's about 7 or 8 minutes now. So, time to cook some clams. First thing with clams, rinse your clams. Now, of course, I'm using little necks. That's kind of the standard of what you're going to find most places that sell clams that aren't also a larger fish market, but little necks little necks it is for right now. And I'm going to, in the interest of conserving some space in here, I'm going to take the little lemons out. Goodbye, lemons. Your work here is done. And also still try to, again, I want to get some flavor out of that. So, if you don't rinse your clams, what you're going to get is grit in here. Because, you know, they're naturally kind of gritty. They come with some sand on them, even from the best of purveyors. So, if you're going to use this as part of your soup later, you kind of want to avoid that. Easily resolved by, you know, just kind of giving them a rinse and being a little bit meticulous about it. But at this point, all you got to do is drop them in. Just to give them a little bit more space, I'm going to go ahead and pull the sachet out. I'm going to strain this, but I can strain it through the sachet, get a little bit more of the flavor that it's got without adding any chunks to it. If I'm just serving this to myself, or my beautiful, lovely wife, will just the fine mesh strainer is sufficient. If Beyonce's coming and I really want to impress her, I will put cheesecloth down there just to make sure any microscopic little bit of grit that I can does not get through the straining process. But yeah, for dinner tonight, it's fine to just leave it there. Ooh, and we can see some of our clams are in fact starting to open like we want them to. So once they are open like this, they are done. That's what we're looking for. And you can remove them in part to give a little bit more space to the rest of the clams. And you can see some of them still aren't there yet, but some of them certainly are. As I'm going, seems like a couple more pop open. We could pile them up. Keep you back in. You're not there yet. I am going to strain this stock. And again, like I said, I'll just kind of, like a coffee filter, just kind of strain it through that. And you can see some of that little bit of grit still in the pan. So I'm going to let that stay there. Nobody wants that part. It doesn't really add anything to the experience. So once again, my pan is clean and ready to go. Going to kind of a medium-high heat. Let that warm up for a second. Meanwhile, start pulling all the clam meats out. Clam shells, you can grind them up and mulch them into your garden. It's actually a really good source of calcium for your plants. If you bought the already cooked clam meat, you're skipping this part. Would probably at least thaw it if you got the frozen stuff first. Alright, that's getting hotter. A little olive oil in there. And to that, we'll add all of my aromatics. Alright, maybe just a dab more oil in there. Shucking these clams while that is cooking. So you see, even with the weight and volume of the clams, the actual meat that you get out of it is considerably less. Now, if you want to go even fancier, you can of course use other clams than just little necks, using some manila and some razor clams in here. Those are always nice. Razor clams tend to be a little on the pricier side, whereas little necks are of the clam families tend to be the most abundant, at least in our market, therefore the least expensive. I'm going to give those aromatics just another moment. And you can see that they are softening. They're starting to glisten a little bit. So I could probably let that go another moment, but I'm getting impatient. I'm going to add a half a cup of wine. Let that simmer a moment. So that's been simmering just a moment. So now I'm going to add the potatoes and pour back in. And start with half of that stuff. Let's go about that. And now all you have to do is simmer that for about 15 minutes and let the potatoes cook. So I'm going to do that. Alright, here we are. Now we have some nice tender potatoes. Oh, that's hot. Well, oh, that's hot. So with that, it is now time to add our cream, which I had put back into the fridge just so it didn't get warm. We will add the cream thusly and the clams to it. Give that a good stir. So while we are there, I have not yet put any salt into it, so I'm going to give a good pinch and a half of salt right there. How much exactly is a pinch and a half? You know, about that much. And so that has now been simmering just another moment. And it still looks like I might have put a little too much liquid in there, but I'm not going to worry about that too much. A little bit more salt because I like things on the salty side. And now I will add my fresh herbs. Dump it up. Give that a good swizzle around. And now we have soup. I always try to get chunky stuff in the bowl first and then cover that with more of the liquidy stuff, but there we are. If you've enjoyed this, like and subscribe, and be sure to share with your friends.